everybody. So we're back again. We have one person coming in, and thank you for those who made it here, and thank you to those that are in the virtual world joining us again. Today we have a very special kind of occasion because we have a guest speaker, and we really I'm very proud to have Jennifer here and have been able to bring her into the conversation. Um, because she's an expert of what we are going to talk about. So we'll get started. I'm recording this session and we'll get people in as they come in. So, you know, usually we start our series talking a little bit about what we have reviewed so far. So this is our sixth. Yeah, believe it or not. It's fun. Yes. So we talked at the beginning of the year about data, how to evolve from individual contributor into an outstanding leader, how to lead your team ahead. 102, we talked about fleet management, and we talked about now we're going to talk about fostering interagency collaborations, which we know can be challenging at times, but Jennifer is here to give us a few tips and the good, the bad, and the ugly, and the good things that come with interagency collaboration. So a few things we like to observe when we are having the workshop, just to keep all present. Remember that when we are thinking about these learnings, we all have the agency to think, change things around for us. We can change other people, but we can hope and work on ourselves so we can do good work. We all learn from each other. We try this space to be an open space that people feel safe and they can share what they think. Mostly learn from the people that attended the workshops. I've been listening to the latest workshops we did, and it's amazing how much we learn from you guys. So please participate and share your thoughts. And then when we disagree, we can practice yes and. So we make sure that the other person doesn't feel uncomfortable about what they said. That every opinion is welcome, and we do it by saying yes and instead, or you're wrong. So thanks for engaging remotely. If you like to speak, just unmute yourself and ask questions. We have a very little screen here, so we don't get to see everybody. We will have a break at some point. And then for the people that are here, our restrooms are on the back. We will be sending the PowerPoint and the supporting docs after the training, and also a survey to get your feedback about what could be done better, what you like, what you think could be. So that's the spiel I give every time. And today we have a very simple, but not simple, but simple agenda. We are going to go in a very different way with this presentation, in which first we're gonna have the opportunity to learn a little bit more about Norwalk Acts and how they do their work. When Norwalk Acts, that's work in the community, they do it in a way that they are partnering with many other organizations around, and we want to learn about the results and the wonderful things they're doing in our community. We want to have a conversation with Jenny. Instead of showing you a PowerPoint and lots of material, what we're gonna have is engaging conversation with her. We have a few questions ready to talk about, like, how do you partner? How do you collaborate with other organizations? We'll open for Q&A for the people that are attending. So if they have any questions that they would like to get more information. And last but not least, we'll have a few final tips for collaboration. So it's going to be really a very interactive kind of conversation today. So with that being said, I'm going to introduce my guest, Jennifer Barahona. I had the good luck to meet her about a year and a half ago, Jennifer, when we were in our whereabouts in the community doing some good work. Jennifer has been linked to nonprofits for a very long time. She's a social worker by career and by choice. She's been pivotal in our community in many different initiatives, as starting by being part of the Children's and Family Agency. Also, she was part of different initiatives after 9/11 to support the community, to support Newtown after the tragedy that happened there. And now she's been with Norwalk as their executive director for how many years? And so she's leading in our town the collaboration among different agencies. So I'll pass it on to you if you want anything to add about yourself. You're more welcome. Please, so I'll give you the baton here.
We're nice to be here. And when she asked me to do it, and I saw the date, I said, I'll do it, but I'm going to be fresh off of, I've been in Orlando with my 16-year-old for 5 days, and I flew in last night. I started, so she said, "Well, just do a conversation." I said, "That's perfect." So, but I did want to spend just a couple minutes talking a little bit about Norwalk Acts. I know some are familiar. I know Lisa is, but is anyone else in the room familiar with Norwalk Acts?
I attended the workshop last week, so you'll be training down here.
The day of training?
Yeah.
Excellent. So just want to give a little bit of a level set about who we are and what we do, and before we get into this conversation, because it's so relevant to the conversation. But so we are a nonprofit organization, a cross sector, what we call cross sector cradle to career partnership, because what we work on is outcomes for young people starting from birth all the way into career economic mobility. So we are the hub, if you will, of multiple agencies, organizations, individuals, educators who are working and committed to a collective impact approach and support our mission. And we are building and welcome anyone at any time. Brandon, who's here with us, is our director of marketing and communications. And so I'll share a little bit more at the end about how you can join our efforts. But it really takes a village. So we hope you'll learn a little bit more and join our efforts. Our mission is to collectively transform systems by ensuring resources, policies, practices, and power structures actively dismantle racism and drive equitable outcomes for every Norwalk child and young person. We know the data. We know that our systems are not equitable, and we know that they are intentionally often built to keep it that way. And so we are really all about pushing back and making sure that all children in Norwalk have the opportunities to succeed. Our vision is that Norwalk is a connected and equitable community where every child and young person thrives. And we focus kind of on academic, physical health and well-being, and social, emotional, or mental, health of people from the cradle to career spectrum. Yvonne mentioned that I'm a social worker, so I am a self-described macro level social worker. So I always tell people the story of when I started my career a long time ago, almost 30 years ago, starting working in Stanford, working with victims of domestic violence. And it was before I went back to graduate school, and I was still trying to figure out kind of what I wanted to do. And I learned very quickly, seeing victim after victim after victim coming into shelter services, that I knew I wanted to go into social work, but I also knew that for me, I needed to spend my career doing something that was changing it so that there wouldn't, be a need at some point for domestic violence services or a food pantry or any number of things that so many of our nonprofits do, because I wanted to work on changing systems so that people had what they needed to survive and thrive. And that why is it that we are just, continuing to see children who are living in poverty or hungry or victims of domestic violence or any number of things, housing, and this year, that people can't afford their own housing. We need kind of what we call microsystems, people doing individual service work, but we also have to be working at the systems change level to prevent, the flow of new people needing those kind of services. There's a analogy that I always talk about. Saul Alinsky was a community organizer who talked about this river analogy, that there was people in the river and drowning, and two people came and were pulling them out and helping rescue, but more and more were in the river, and what is happening? And one person left, one of the rescuers, and the other one said, "Where are you going? There are all these people that need." They said, "I'm going upriver to see why all these people are, where they're coming from and why they're in the river in the first place," right? Mm-hmm. So that has always stuck with me. And so as I You know, if I mentioned some of my career trajectory was, you know, becoming a social worker, but then always thinking about systems change work. So when I was at 13 years at Family and Children's Agency just down the street as their youth development director, I would partner with, you know, I remember Curtis Law from the Housing Authority. I couldn't run my program without Curtis helping get kids who lived in housing over to the program using transportation and things. So this idea of, you know, I can offer this service, but I can't offer transportation. So how do I reach out to another community partner that might have this and I have that? So early on in my career, it was always thinking about how we can work collaboratively in a community for the betterment of young people and families. So when I came to Norwalk Acts 5 years ago, I was actually teaching a course at Sacred Heart University in the School of Social Work in it's called Micro, Meso, and Macro Systems. And I brought Norwalk Acts into the last class of the semester as an example to the students of what this kind of collaboration looks like. I had been in Norwalk when Norwalk Acts first started, and I can share more about that later, but I had been then up in Newtown. I was overseeing as Yvonne said, the recovery, community-wide recovery from the shooting at the elementary school, and but had stayed in good touch and friends with the people leading Norwalk Acts. So I said, come in, I'm teaching class, we should talk about this. And then about a month later, that course, the position for the CEO role opened up, and right, this is, you know, I'm ready to return to Norwalk where my husband and I met. We had, you know, originally had a condo here, had our firstborn here. My in-laws still live here, so very much grounded in the Norwalk community, and had been here for 13 years working at FCA. So that was 5 years ago. And I came back and I kind of organized our work with this in mind, this trying to talk about our work from the micro, meso, and macro systems and how it is all combined and has to work in kind of a symbiotic relationship in order for us to really change systems. So down to the individual individual clients, families, up to this kind of community level, cross-sector partnerships, and at the highest level, really some of the things like policy change that we need to make if we're going to get the kind of outcomes that we seek. We do this in 3 main areas: early childhood, with developmental screening work for children birth to 5, with the plan to get them ready for kindergarten, on track developmentally when they start kindergarten. And we've had a lot of success, and I can talk about that later, but we've seen a 9 percentage point increase due to this community work. When I say we, Norwalk Acts is a collective of the 200 people, you 200 groups and organizations. So just bear that in mind. When I say we have, it's inclusive of all of our partnerships. Change the early childhood system so that there's routine developmental screening happening throughout the community, teaching parents about developmental milestones, helping them be their children's first best teachers, and that has led to pretty dramatic improvements in the number of children in Norwalk who are ready developmentally to enter kindergarten. Then we do work in the social emotional health space, which is really all about connecting young people with the resources, the relationships and supports they need, based on the data that we every other year work with the school district to see how young people are doing, and they're, you know, they're surprised they're not doing that great. There's a lot of depression, anxiety, suicidal ideation, lack of feeling connected to community, lack of positive influence as an adult. So our social emotional health initiative really works to connect young people and to skill build. This young lady said she was at one of our data training last week, which was skill building for 100 community Norwalk residents and workers to really build the skills they need to support young people. And then our newest initiative, which I actually saw in the back, there was a QR code for join our workforce development newsletter. This is newer, so still a little fledgling of trying to make sure that we have pathways and pipelines for young people, regardless of whether they're going to attend a 2-year degree program, have the chance to have economic mobility. And so here with the school district, partners like yourselves, business community, to really create these kind of pathways for people. Then we talk also within those 3 areas about what we can lend to capacity building for nonprofits and partners to do this work, and we talk about this in we call our cornerstones, and that is data informing all decision making. That we really want to make sure that we're looking at both quantitative and qualitative data to make sure that we know what the problems are and can be more laser focused on solutions. I'm a former for a brief time, I was a legislative liaison and registered lobbyist to in Bridgeport. And what, 20, what year are we in? 24 years ago, for 24 years, I've been wanting to bring an initiative to Norwalk that actually just went off the ground, and that Eric was here, was first cohort of what we're calling civic influencers, to really train community members to understand how to lean into their power and make government much more inclusive. And so I don't think that we're going to see the results we need to see unless we're changing policy and at the highest levels, unless we're getting community members equipped to be voices for those changes. We all of our work is really always pointed to looking at the disparities in race and social inequities, and how we make sure that we're calling that out, calling that in, as some people say, and addressing it, and not being afraid to name it and address the disparities. And that we really need to engage community and those with the lived experience to drive decision making. That, who am I to come up with the solutions for this community? I come with one lens, and it's a valid lens, but you come with a different, and you come with another. And so the community is stronger when we're all making those decisions together. So those are kind of our grounding cornerstones. And I think, was that the last? I already talked about this, the initiative overviews. So I already talked about that in the previous one. And so just a little shout out to all of you to join us. Here's our website. We're updating our memorandum agreement as a community partnership as we speak, and we were going to launch the new MOA 10-year anniversary event on October 22nd. You're all invited, and you'll join us, so that we'll save the date. So that's my brief overview of Norwalk Acts. There are what we call like an evergreen document, which is the nuts and bolts of our partnership here, and then our latest strategic plan on the table in the back if you want to take those with you. And both can be found on our website.
Awesome. Thank you, Jennifer. That was a great introduction. Anybody have any questions for Jennifer about Norwalk Acts? Any questions that come to mind at this point? Okay, so I'm gonna stop sharing so we can see Jennifer better, and let's see, that's not what I want. Well, work on it while we I don't see it.
Wanna stop sharing? Like in the red. Yeah.
It was like, thank you so much. I need my glass, which I'm gonna grab actually, because I really need that.
Depending on what you're doing, but actually, the question is, have you been specifically about systems change, when you started to kind of transition into that, careers, did you start that? Do you feel like you've seen, I mean, you changed different things within Norwalk Acts, but in general, do you feel like systems are changing or have changed, or maybe some have changed and then they went back?
True.
That is, I know, that is some of the struggle, right? Sometimes in certain things, yes, we have, and in other things, it's one step forward and we haven't taken that far. That is super frustrating. So we have some specific examples, like in early childhood work prevention, that feel really good about we have, and the same with the social health. So the areas that we're kind of focusing on, yes, there are. I think for me personally, as a social worker, I care about so many different things that have nothing to do with my job. That's right. I mean, all the environment. So I actually, I'm not shy whatsoever about it. I'm taking a leave of absence this summer and in part it's because I'm just burnt out. I've been at this for a long time. It's taken a toll. I care about so many things and while we see progress in some areas, it is really hard. You know, to this climate we're in, a lot of sick, you know, behavior and just vitriol and yeah, so I so that's while that's hard, I still with every fiber of my being believe that's the only way to change systems is to do what we're doing. And so, you know, I said, you know, to my board whenever I just need a little breather so I can re-energize and come back fresh to the work because it's not good to anybody if I'm struck, right? So yes and no. It doesn't, you know, mean that we're gonna give up, but it's yeah.
It's not killed kind of battle, but you know, I think that you're giving again a great example to other leaders in the community. When you're thinking about living for a little bit and then taking the time to think what you're doing and what you're gonna bring back to the community, taking that time, I think we forget do that, and but we can't be what we don't have. So moving into collaboration, my first question to you, Jennifer, was, you know, you have been able to congregate many partners in our work and around the area, in order to create this successful collective impact. In your experience, with so many partners, maybe 200 people and more in groups and so on, is a lot. And what doesn't work?
No. So, I, you know, being clear about, you know, the goals and the shared agenda, shared alignment. I mean, we were just talking about, there's so many things that we could be tackling. So I think like learning to kind of winnow it down to a key things to work on. When I first took my role here in Newark, there was like 8 initiatives going on. There was a digital learning and I was like, we need to, you know, like focus on a few key areas. And so that's where we came up with these 3 early childhood application, college workforce readiness. So I think being totally clear on some shared goals, building relationships. We have different taglines, but you know, everyone's heard this relationship. It moves at this speed of trust, right? So, you know, no collaboration works without trust. And you only build trust when you get to know people and you prove yourself and you show up. And that is hard to do with a large network. And sometimes, so it's, you know, it's modeling, it's also setting the groundwork. We sometimes call ourselves, one of the analogies for this, but you know, we've been called the hub, the connective tissue, Grand Central Station, like, you know, with an eye on all the various trains coming and going. And I say sometimes I've permanently titled me like a dot connector because I love when I meet someone. It's like, oh, you're doing this great work and you don't know that this person across town is doing that great work. So it's like that being up on the balcony and like, oh, you two need to connect. Or you, that organization, and do you know this person? And then the intro, and you see like magic happen. And I love that. That's what energizes me. I love to see that. So that's you know, just getting to know people. I think helping partners understand the mutual benefit once you know associated, and to your point, it can be really, I think the challenge comes with systems change work is a long game, you know, it's a marathon. And so if you're looking to see super quick results, it's trading, right? And I think the challenge is identifying the wins along the way to keep partners engaged. And I'm not sure we've always been terribly good about that. I always talk about one of my favorite movies is The Shawshank Redemption. I'm sure we've all seen that. Do you remember when he tunneled through, right? He tunneled with that little pit for like years. And someone said once, I was in a keynote address and they were saying, you know, you have system change where it's a little bit like tunneling through and you may never get to the other side, but the people that are coming after you have to tunnel a little bit less because of the work you did, and the people after them, and eventually they're going to break through. And you know, and I've always loved that kind of analogy too. So patience is a challenge and an opportunity, and so getting partners to come to the table who understand that.
Right. And that takes me to another question, which is not the next one I have in my list, but as I was listening to you, one of the things that you were mentioning is that you have to decide where to go. Where are you gonna where are you gonna put your efforts, because you can't do everything. Imagine also running a collective like that. You may get a lot of ideas, a lot of people that want to do other things that are not really tied to the mission. With that, I think all of nonprofits face that problem, right? And sometimes those ideas come with money, which makes it a lot harder to say no.
Yeah, I mean, every nonprofit faces that, whether you chase the dollars on a grant or, it's so hard, especially in this climate right now, to say no to funding opportunities, but mission creep can be a real thing. And I think some of the beauty of partnerships is if we are all about the betterment of Norwalk, and in our case, children and young people, then you see an opportunity. You don't have to do it all because you're connected with all these partners and say, oh, there's a great resource. We see that all the time. There's a grant opportunity, something, but I know this person or these two groups that do that work. So it's almost like stay in your lane, like know your lane and help the people in those lanes get the resources to fill the capacity they need. So if I think of, the biggest benefit for other nonprofits and everyone wanting to be part of it is that pressure that you can't be all things to all people. You have to, but you also have to have trust that I know I can't do the housing piece, so I gotta trust my partner over at the housing authority or whatnot to be doing their piece and vice versa.
Right. Yeah, that is a challenging thing to face, right? Yeah. But it's good. That's a good opportunity to partner with Jennifer for too, because she's sending you furniture. When she can't say yes to money, she'll connect you with somebody.
But also, to your question too, we have, our initiatives have small steering committee of kind of the planning group, and then we have larger initiative meetings. And for instance, in our strategic plan, the initiative members, which are populated by, all sorts of our larger membership, will spend many meetings looking at the data. What is the data telling us? And what do we think we can make some measurable impact on? And it wasn't me and the small team saying we're gonna do, reducing depression or suicidal ideation or this. It was the membership who's saying, all right, here's the menu of issues. What do we think we can influence? Where can we make some impact? What can we do? And it's that shared ownership too of, the shared accountability, shared ownership of we all decided these were the things. So if someone comes in and says, we've had that actually, and we had a newer staff member and, he was like, oh, this group wants to, and I said, well, bring it back to the programs. Does it fit within the strategic plan that they laid out last fall? If it doesn't, we have to say, that's wonderful, but we don't have bandwidth now. Here's another partner, or maybe, it's just
That's one of the things that I admire so much about the work you do, because you work based on data. And the data that is coming from the people you're serving, not from the people that believe they can fix somebody else's lives by doing this thing.
Yes.
So
my Stacey Abrams was a keynote speaker at a conference I was at. Other people have said it too, but it was, I think, the first time I heard someone say it. And she said, if you want to know how to help a struggling family or child, right? Like right. Those closest to this, source or closest to the solutions.
yeah,
Just often lack the resources to, make it happen.
absolutely. So what are the most difficult parts of collaboration?
I think there are certain systems, large systems, often public government or, that, have a charge or have something, and they're so, I think of the school systems, for instance, they have so many unfunded mandates, so many pressures to do so much. It's hard. Collaboration takes time, it takes resources, and so when that is squeezed and limited, sometimes you just, you have your head down and you're doing your work, and it's hard to be able to kind of zoom back out and partner. And so I think it's this idea of everyone's putting out fires all the time, right? Like everybody's going at such a fast pace. And we could go probably further and more efficient if we took the time to plan and collaborate. We build in that time when we're all together. And that's really hard. Oh, there's some waiting. I'm
Thank you.
just noticed. So that's a challenge, I think, lack of taking the time to develop relationships is huge. I always tell it, newest staff member, and I said it may seem weird, but I learned this from one of my first bosses. But like we start our staff meetings with good ones. It was probably 25, 30 minutes of just how was your weekend, or me telling about my trip to Orlando, or Paula's do that, you know, and that's how you get to know when you get to know people outside of just their title and their role. Like that's where that's the secret sauce. And I have another really live example of this. Just a couple of weeks ago, I had breakfast periodically with the superintendent. And, you know, it's not in her office or my office where it's, you know, we go to the diner, we have breakfast, and we talk, and we, you know, update each other on things. And she asked, you know, how I was, you know, spent some of my time off this summer, and I started sharing about, you know, I had time at Kapalu, which is a meditation retreat place up in Berkshire, and you know, just sharing about my plans to hike and spend time in nature, and that led to, you know, oh, I did this thing when I was superintendent down, and like, well, and then she didn't know we had brought in this resource to the community that she had wished, you know, so this like never would have happened if we weren't just talking as human beings about like our summer plans. And it led to this like amazing realization that we have this aligned interest in bringing more, you know, grounding meditation type work into with our young people and our walk. And it's like, you know, that was like 50 minutes into the breakfast. And like, again, if we just hadn't started talking informally about our lives, we may not have ever known that.
Right. Reminds me of a quote I read once that you say, never focus so much about the work that you forget about the people. And I have never been able to find where I read it, maybe I imagine it, but think about that, because sometimes you get so much into the everyday what needs to be done, but the next project that you forget about making connections with the people that are gonna get you there where you have to spend time.
Yeah, I mean, I've worked in, you know, a lot of places, and I just don't, I mean, I still have young children, but it's hard to, particularly working mothers, it's hard to balance it. And so I remember saying, if I'm ever boss, like this is how I do things, and now I'm boss. So I try to create a work environment that is extremely flexible. I mean, we're juggling so many things, and just being, you know, generous with time off and flexibility, and it's just so important. If you don't have happy people working for you, feeling supported, then you know you're not going to get the best of it.
And that is changing a system in itself.
Which is why I went public with my time off. I was very vulnerable about taking time separate. In fact, at the day of training, I'm sure many of you know Ginger Katz, who started the Courage to Speak Foundation. She came up to me and said, thank you for sharing about your time off and why. And she said, that's why I named my organization the Courage to Speak, because it takes someone having courage to name an issue that sometimes, you know, is hard. But, you know, how am I a leader of an organization that works on youth mental health, and I'm not vulnerable myself to say I'm having a hard time and I need to step away. So that is, you know, so we're changing, you know, nonprofit operating systems, and because we're a partnership organization, it does feel like modeling. You know, we were one of the first, I think, to take Juneteenth as a holiday. We do, you know, worry about summer Fridays in the corporate sector, and I wanted not summer Fridays. You know, we have summer Fridays where we close a little earlier in the summer and give staff a little bit of a longer weekend, and you know, things like that that are not difficult to do. You know, just do them. You know, certainly direct service providers. I recognize that we have a luxury to do that because we're not seeing clients and, so there has to be understanding there, but where you can build up flexibility, it's just key.
Absolutely. Thank you for showing us that example. So if you have to pick an essential component of making interagency collaboration successful, what would that be? Relationship wise.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think, relationship building and getting to know what are the other resources in the community, because so often I'll meet with a partner who will say, we're going after a grant, or there's an opportunity to, we think this just happened there, we need more intensive outpatient treatment for young people, but they didn't know that New Van's opened an IOP on the corner of, Westport Avenue and East Avenue in the last 2 years. So this is a organizational leader looking to solve a problem that I'm not suggesting it's been solved, but that there's at least someone over here that's already doing it. So let's make sure before we locate resources or, and it also looks frankly foolish if you're going out to a funder or someone and saying, we have this need, and they're like, well, what about a group over here that does that in your community? No, like, look at, right? And so we know resources are scarce, and so we really want to make sure we're avoiding that being additive. And that's the puzzle piece kind of, again, you're doing this and you do that well while I do this. So one of the principles of collective impact is mutually reinforcing activities. And it's that idea of let's make sure that all the needs are met. And sometimes when you map that out, you do this, you do that, then you're like, oh, there's a gap and nobody's doing this piece of it. And that's where maybe we can come together and develop some programming or go after some more.
Awesome. So when you are thinking about collaborations and you're mapping your strategy, how would be the conversation you start? And I'm asking you this because I've been at tables in which we have talked about collaborations and the conversation have been great and they lead nowhere. So people get a little bit like, we're having all these meetings and nothing ever happens. So
Yeah.
hopefully do you start having these conversations with people?
Well, so there's one key component to all of this, which is, so we, it's a little jargony, but our team is called the backbone team of the Nortex partnership, and they're paid employees who keep the motor running, keep the Grand Central going, because I have been part of them too, collaborations where, and I'm part of one right now that I'm part of the problem. It's that we want to do these cleanups. I live in Fairfield now. We don't live in Norwalk any longer, but I want to organize these park cleanups. Over, I've got 8 million things going on and a job and this and that. And so does everyone else who's coming together. So that was about 2 months ago. Have we done anything since? We had that big meeting? No, because nobody's job, it's like nobody's paid job or nobody's main thing to keep it going. And, that's not to mean that every partnership always needs, paid staff behind it, but for a big initiative like Norwalk Acts, we have a meeting, we have an idea, someone is sending out the agenda, the results, the action steps during this meeting. Randall agreed to do X, Y, and Z. Eric said he would do this. Yvonne said so. Someone following up. Yvonne, did you get to do that, thing yet? And I know, for instance, the Norwalk Integration Coalition a few years ago, we were participating, but there was no, there was a couple, like Pastor Liz left the community. You have a leader who left the community, and then she was the main thing, and and I wasn't terribly involved, so I don't want to assume why things, maybe kind of fell by the wayside. But if you don't have someone whose role it is to be following up, it often will just, not go anywhere.
Right. And I am so glad you mentioned that because it leads me to my next question, which is about building capacity, right? Many times we are entering these conversations, and here is another task for either the leader, the executive director, or somebody else who already has a place to go. So it's important for nonprofits to build that capacity in order to make those partnerships happen. So the question is, what profits can find a way to build that capacity?
Yeah, that is certainly a challenge. So I had the privilege of working for Family and Children's Agency. It was 200 employees and lots of people, and I had a staff. but so that's how I first actually got involved in NORAC-X, employee of the Family and Children's Agency. Before NORAC-X became, actually, this is proving my point. NORAC-X in concept started in the early 2000s as a group of people coming together and saying there's all this disparity in data from kids being suspended, mostly Black boys being overly, disproportionately suspended, expelled, etc. That's how it came together with Reverend Curtis, David Levinson, who was at NCC at the time, and a few other people. And there was a lot of talk and some meetings going on and whatnot. And I started going to those because of my earlier comments about, that's where I met Curtis Law and Paulette and other people, because I was like, well, I'm putting this program here, but I want to know what you're doing and how can I learn? Maybe you're doing something really extraordinary with your young people that I should know about, or vice versa. And so it was that idea that we should, start coming together. But NORAC didn't have a paid employee until 2015, and that was only a part-time data director. And then it's, built from there. But so we didn't really, we weren't producing reports, and there was no paid person to do it. I was part of it, but I was back at FCA leading youth work, and Novelette was leading the Carver, and Curtis was leading housing. It was like, so I think there is, for a particular challenge for some of the smaller, more grassroots organizations to lean in. There's also opportunities to avoid some of the redundancies, for instance, or a good example is our data. So when anyone's going after resources or funding or grants, one of the first things they ask for is data. So if you're a small handful of people operation and you are trying to prove a point about the services you're doing, we have 1.5 full-time data people working on our team, and we have a data sharing agreement with the district, and we have this. We can cohort data. We do this with the housing, North Housing Authority. We do this with the Family and Children's Agency, with releases and privacy taken care of and all that, of course. We say, well, you don't need a data person on your team. We can do that. We just need to know what kids you're serving to make sure there's a release, and then we can show, send you the results so that. And so, we can add capacity, and that's where that mutual benefit from partnering comes in, that we have to be maybe a little better about communicating the value add to a small partnership or nonprofit who feel like they don't have time or to give. Sometimes it's also, fits and starts, you see what's happening in a partnership and where you want to lean in and spend your time and resources, and maybe you go to meetings for this and that's not quite it. But I think one of the values of NORAC-X too is we do a membership convening every quarter at Stepping Stones, and the first half hour is just breakfast and have your name tag, you meet someone new. That's when we do some of that dot connecting. And so that's a good opportunity for nonprofits to come together, learn from one another. And we'll be doing more. We actually just in our staff meeting this morning was talking about, based on our cornerstones, for groups who want to lean in and learn more about their policy and advocacy, community engagement, race equity, or the data, that we'll be doing more kind of the workshops that you're doing here. But frankly, you had one on data, and I said, well, we don't have to do it. And we were just doing it one here because they said, that's where it's like, we were marketing the heck out of your data one, because it was like, right. So how do we help our, continue to do more of these things and help the groups less resources?
Absolutely. So it's about, building capacity. Sounds like it's about reaching out to the right people who have that resource and be able to access it that way. Especially if you're a small nonprofit, you can access it to partners.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think that, there is a point to be made that, funders need to start thinking about, and some of them do, how do we fund things that are not necessarily direct service, right? When most nonprofits apply for a grant, the maximum you can apply for administrative work is 15-20% of the work, because they want you to be using the money to give them to the work. But how can you prove it work if you don't have that administrative?
Don't get me on that soapbox. Yeah. I mean, I have seen chips in the systems and some funders, carefully, because that is, one of the most frustrating things. That there's a leader, Boulay, who talks about and he says, the funder who says, we want bread, but won't pay for the oven, right? We'll pay for the flour and the water and the whatever, but the oven is overhead, so you've got to figure it, it's like ridiculous. So, and in our work, it's all kind of overhead we don't have, so, but even as we get pressure, well, what's your data budget or what's your, but are no different than the other partners in terms of relationship building. That's hard because there's a power dynamic inherent with funders. But I've been a little bit more, brave, or is, but out there too to say, like, we're not going after everything. It's been problematic. We're saying, there's an article I just was reading a couple of weeks ago about the net grant, where it's the amount of time I have spent to prepare this grant, right? Like we should start saying, all right, I'm applying for a $10,000 grant, but I have spent $3,000 in my staff salary, time, and resources to apply for this grant. So you'll actually be giving us $7,000 because, and some funders, it's ridiculous how much reporting and all of that. I'm very fortunate in Oregon. That's a lot of trust-based philanthropy. Some major donors who are really generous and who just, they're involved in our work, they're on our board or part of a committee or something where they see the work and they don't, we have a relationship, maybe we'll go out for lunch once a year and we'll talk and, the check comes and those are actually the most valuable partners there are. There was just a link, what did I send you that? Link between philanthropy and burnout with nonprofit.
Yes.
There was just a report that was just done locally in Connecticut about some of the funding practices and the burnout that it's causing. And I personally, feel that business, corporate sector, we don't tap into as much as we should or ask as much from, particularly when there's large profit margins. The nonprofits are disproportionately burdened to fix the things that society has, right? The systems that we have created, and then we under-resource them, we overtax them, we overstress them, literal taxation of people's, all of their resources, internal and otherwise, to fix when we burn people out. It's a real problem.
Yes, listen to this. In the report, they say that from the nonprofits they survey, in the last year, 80% of the leaders consider leaving their job at some point.
Yeah.
In the last year.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's big. Yeah. So more, we may end up in a very bad place here. In a conversation this way. What is it that you have done in your work or the coalition has done that you are most proud?
I really like when a new leader or someone comes into Norwalk and I get an email and they want to meet with me and they'll say, Paul Lamont, Daniel, or whoever said, oh, well, your first stop should be Norwalk. Like they're the top, like they have their pulse on, and we have our pulse on the work that we're doing. There's a lot more going on that we don't, but if they're involved with children and youth, whatever they'll say, you've got to stop first, speak with Jennifer, get a lay of the land. So that kind of idea of this, it's like our vision, this idea of a connected community working together. Children. I'm really proud of work. I think we have proved we've become an exemplar across the state and our national network. Frequently highlights our work in the early childhood space as proof that it can be done if you do it in this way. So just to highlight that example and give you a little more detail, there's something called Ages and Stages questionnaire. There's 21 screenings between when the child is born and when they turn 5 years old that shows a parent or caregiver where the child is developing in their 5 main domains of the child's fine motor, gross motor, social communication, etc. So there's these questions. I did them when my daughter was born. I was like, it's cool. And I would fill it out and I'd get a return like they're on track here, or you might want to, here are some activities to help encourage their verbal development. And so, I happen to have an undergraduate degree in child development. Not everybody has that, right? So you have a baby and you don't know whether there's delayed in some area. And we know that if you catch delays early, earlier the better, more likely that you can, assist with something. So that connection to resources in the community to support children and families. But all the preschool, the early care and education programs, everybody was using, tool, so collective impact, let's all agree to measure something the same way. So if we all use the same tool, we all start promoting this with families and saying this is the tool everyone should use. And we created a data system on the other end so that we funnel all the screenings that happen throughout Norfolk, whether you're at early care, at Bright Horizons, or whether you're at your pediatrician is doing a screening at your 2-month well visit, that all comes into a data system that RX works on. And that's why we're able to say developmentally, the percentage of increase in kids entering kindergarten. So the policy change we got done a couple of years ago was had school district as a partner, so that as part of the kindergarten registration, every family, whether they've done any of the previous screenings or not, does one at 60 months, years. So that's now part of the kindergarten registration years now. But now we have some really rich data. And for the first time last year, we, because of our data sharing agreement with the district, are able to show the kids that we've been able to get on track developmentally are now reading on 3rd grade reading level. And that's the other key, there's a couple key points which researchers, economists show that if you can get kids reading to grade level in 3rd grade, on math level in 8th grade, that they're more likely to be economically independent and believe adults. So that's why, that's one of the key indicators. So now we have longitudinal data which we can show. This effort in the early childhood community has led to this, which hopefully over the years, better outcomes all the way through the continuum. But that was, there was resistance at first. That was, well, why do we do it this way? And then some, and there's another key lesson that we learned, which was you start with the coalition of the willing. That if we have 3 early care providers at one end and the others want to do their own thing, okay, let's start with the 3 that want to do this, and over time, then people see results, they want to maybe join in. And we also, it's a bandwidth issue. How many partners can you work with? So we started with early care and education programs, preschool, mostly school readiness and Head Start. And then now a year ago, with the Nora Community Health Center, Ken Waller, they had a federal grant opportunity, and they said, we'd love to expand this into the pediatric space, which is an area we've been very eager to partner for several years. So now we were able to start a pilot with some federal grant resources with the Nora Community Health Center, and we have community advocates who are parents, mothers themselves in the community who speak in the target language, predominantly Spanish. They go and sit in the waiting rooms at North Community Health Center, and they start engaging in conversation with a parent to parent, or I have a 2-year-old and I didn't know because I had just come here from the doors, and there is to have those conversations. Something with someone like me wouldn't be able to have, right? So that's been really wonderful, and so we've seen some great progress there. So that is a huge point of pride. It also shows, I think, we go back and talk about some of the early days and the warts, the hard time, because when we're talking about like eligible workforce readiness, I'll say to staff too, this was how it was in the beginning. It wasn't always, there was a resistance, so sometimes when we're working on a new initiative, we have to remind ourselves that it involves changes over time. And then I'm super proud of the Civic Influencer program we just launched. I mentioned Eric here was one of our first participants, and we also do what we call a plan to study act cycle, PDSA, which is you have a theory, it's kind of like the scientific method. You try something, you say what worked, you change it, you do it again, what worked, and you evolve over time. So this was the first one. We're learning an awful lot. We actually have a board member who is did IRB research on this through her doctorate program, so she'll be able to say, what really helped, what should we tweak for the next cohort when we do this again in the fall.
Fantastic. I think that, you're so on target because sometimes we put ourselves so much in pressure to kind of like come out with the perfect program right away. And all these things have come with a trial and error, right? You try a little something and see what works and what doesn't, and then you go on. And you don't have to have the perfect piece right away or the piece. Yeah. Yeah, recently I always talk about books that I'm reading, so I'll talk about another book. I don't know if you're familiar with it. It's called Where Good Ideas Come From. No, no. The great book. We did it in audio, so I listen in the car. It's fantastic traffic we have here. And it talks a lot about how people come to these great ideas, and one it is like those 6 sources of getting good ideas, but trial and error is a big.
Yeah.
It's this, right?
It's huge, as is diverse voices on the table, right? Like, so I don't think he would mind me saying this, but in a meeting of legislators this session, it was a bipartisan group, Democrats, Republicans, and they were talking about the benefits cliff. So for families who might be accessing certain, benefits, like food stamps or whatever, if you make too much money, you lose that benefit. And the threshold for losing it is so low that it's when we talk about systems change, that's a system that is designed to keep people poor. Right. Right. And so we're talking about this, and Representative Roberts was able to say, and he was in a relatively homogeneous, at least in terms of race and probably socioeconomic status of legislators. And he said, when my mother ran a daycare, and when I was in high school, I couldn't, I could only work this amount because if they contributed to my household income, we would have lost our housing voucher, right? It contributed to the household income I made, right? But because he had that experience, not one legislator in that room thought of that or had any idea of what that looked like in person, because none of them had ever lived that, right? And so this is why representation is so important when people are setting policy. If we're all, and it's not just, if they all look like me or they all look like you, that, we have to have diverse experience and voices at all tables. Otherwise, the solutions are only coming from one set of people, right?
Absolutely. People who don't know other realities, they may have the best intentions, but because they don't know other people's realities, their voices are created on what's there. So we take a little break so you can get a sip of water. And so I will do 5 minutes. It's 1:29, so we'll be back at 1:35. Maybe an extra minute. And I'll pause the. And we will back to this conversation. Just so you know, Jennifer, all these videos go into the website for Novak redevelopment, so people are able to watch these presentations later. So it's always the opportunity for people to catch up and continue this. Any questions for Jennifer? We continue moving on with the conversation. Anything that sparked your curiosity while we were talking?
I think I'm just sharing with Eric. Sure. See, I feel better. Just sharing about the population issues. I'm a case manager for the house city, so I have, the tenants, clients, people who need to be referrals. I'm the resource for. So my biggest thing is to build a relationship. That I was telling him, one of my biggest pet peeve is that communication. I've gone to different agencies where I'm dealing with Mary for years. Mary leaves, and I just wish that I would get some kind of information that Mary's no longer there. And that kind of breaks that issue of,
continuity.
yeah, like where do I tell this individual? Because I'm like, tell Mary Sharon because Mary will know. if you're coming from me, da, 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 da.
Yeah.
So when the person goes there, they're like, we're going back. Because da, 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 or they don't trust you to give them the proper referral. That's something that I think we need to really focus on getting agencies to do. And that's part of the whole, I think, the communication process. That's understandable because, you know, we put out, we leave.
Yeah.
But, I've dealt with like multiple health and dental races that just simply send a message and say, hey, Sharon, I'm no longer here.
Yeah.
You know, and that makes it better because they like, is there anyone else? So I can build another relationship with someone else in that agency.
Yep.
Um,
Totally agree, and when you asked about the challenges before, I think I had it in my notes, and I'm sure I said it there, but, leadership turnover is a huge roadblock in our work, and you're getting such good momentum, and then, especially in a big system, like the school district, you have a new superintendent or someone in like all this momentum and progress, makes it really challenging. We, do a mental health walk every, May, and after this year's one, I said, you know, the benefit, I felt like, I mean, there was community members who came and got materials and whatnot, but I myself was going table to table and, you know, I met some completely new people, and again, that, you know, where. And so we're going into planning the first half of July for next year, and we're talking about our social and mental health space as being more of that, like, how do we make sure that we're connecting providers, you know, I know when COVID first hit, we partnered with the city, it's that. Lamond was wonderful to start those provider calls on Friday mornings, the Friday morning, 8:30 to 10 or whatever they are. A tremendous way to connect with people, and so that's a great thing, and that's great, but I totally agree. I mean, even internally, when I took my role, our record keeping was not great, so we invested in Salesforce, which is a big investment, but, you know, donor relations or any, you know, if someone leaves and you don't have documentation, I have no idea where your last conversation left off, and even building in, so for nonprofits, we have an employee leaving, and, you know, part of the transition will be handoff of relationships and of taking the time to update Salesforce and make sure we know where you left off with this person, and like, but so often doesn't happen, right? Budgets are tight, so you can't, you know, afford to keep someone on an extra week to do that transition, but those are the things. Again, back to the funders and things that actually, funders, I said, particularly with the stat you read about 80% of nonprofit leaders have thought about leaving their job in the last year. Pushing funders to think about like a transition fund, or a sabbatical fund or something to help prevent leadership turnover, but if there is, how do you do it in a really planful way? You know, so it's not just, oh, well, you know, obviously the longer someone's been there, you hope you get more of a transition of a month or 2 or 3 even, or as long as you can get, but so often it's, you know, 2 weeks or I mean, that's.
and also the information, I had an incident where I took someone somewhere to speak. And when the person's like, oh, they said I have this, that, da, 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 da. Now, that's not what I know you have to do. But when you change the policies, we are your partners. Yeah, we should know that.
Yes, yeah.
We should definitely know this because now, no, that's absolutely right. That's one of our biggest problems. Communication,
Yeah.
nobody.
And the trusted, I mean, you just said you're a trusted messenger, so when someone leaves who's a trusted messenger, that's, and for vulnerable populations who have been, you know, wronged a lot, like, it's a really long time to trust someone. Yeah.
But like you said, it's something we gotta work. It's going in the, no, I mean, I went to the girl and said, listen. I need to know what goes on here. Plain and simple, because I'm not gonna refer somebody else if I don't know what's going on. I know you used to do X, Y, and Z, now you're doing ABC, so can I know?
Yeah.
So I can tell my agency what we're doing now.
Yeah.
You know, we need to do that, and I need more people do that, and I know. Like you said, the turnover, the employment situation is such.
That's the word.
Yeah, and one of the things I like to point out, because I always bring these conversations back to ourselves, is that, well, we can't do that for other people, but we can do it for ourselves, right? So if we are seeing that there is a system that is not working, at least within our own power, we can do something that if I have to leave my agency because I'm retiring or I'm making a different life choice, then all the information that my team is gonna need is there and available and in a place that everybody knows it, so that it can be passed on.
We actually, part of our staff retreat coming up, we're asking all of our employees to, if you haven't had an updated job description, look at your job description. Is it updated? Or your, what would be a transition plan? I mean, I had to literally leave to go to, I guess that one was. I literally went to Florida over January and I said to my friend, I need 3 days in your house, no children, whatever. She's lovely. I said, I just need to work somewhere quietly for a couple days because I need to build a transition plan. I don't have a transition plan. I'm not planning to go anywhere, but every nonprofit, everybody should have. There's an unplanned or planned, right? If they used to say under the bus, or the nicer term is I win the lottery tomorrow and I moved to. But
Back up.
but when you're in it and the fires you're putting out and all that, like I mentioned, you have to sit and think. It's not something you can do 10 minutes here, 5 minutes between meetings. So I just went on a working retreat and just started listing all the things I do and what would happen if I wasn't here and who would but doing that for every role, not just me, but so we're having staff spend time this summer to really outline that. And then we'll be updating that.
You're working with people, and you really love that. Love. And you're passionate about it, then you worry about it. If you're doing it for paper, change, then it's just, okay, I keep moving on.
Yeah.
But my thing is, I love what I'm doing, the people that I'm serving, and I'm gonna make sure they get the best service. So I'm gonna give them all. So I know that the next person coming on board, I want them to know. I mean, I have case notes of what's ready, so. Just so you can see where this person left off or what this person is going through.
Yeah.
And I think, it's so important to take that initiative
Right,
as your own self. That.
I recently circulated a list of partners amongst the staff where I am and said, okay, all of you please put who is your contact at that organization. We need to have it. If you go on vacation and we need to connect with them, we need to have their name in that email address. As basic as that, right?
Well, that's what's been so helpful about Salesforce. I can go in and see, who's the last person I connected with there, the emails there, that, all linked to our emails, so it's all out of my face.
Salesforce is
Like, and I did like
an Outlook type.
sorry, I was.
It's a customer relation management.
Okay, CRM.
Do you use the nonprofit version or do you use the
The nonprofit, it's a back, but
yeah, I wanna look into it. All right, so having the systems in place is part of building capacity, right? So, one thing I wanted to ask you before you join our acts, and you talked about it a little bit when you were talking about teaching at Sacred Heart and being children and family agency. What did you see nonprofits trying to collaborate that you thought, oh, maybe this could be done better, maybe this could help.
I have seen a dramatic improvement in actually wanting to collaborate for the sake of the betterment of clients and whatnot. When I was with FCA years ago, I'd be very involved in grant writing. There's always a question on your collaborations in the community. And quite frankly, it was an exercise in creative writing. Pick something that sounded good and try to stretch the truth a little bit. And now I really feel like there's been a shift. Even there's resources. I just wrote a collaborative grant. One of the foundations had money for social emotional health work, so we convened partners that will FCA would get this amount or X would get that, you know, even when there's funding on the table, people really like, well, Mid-Fairfield does this better, they should do that piece, and we can do this, or next could do, you know, so, really, you know, much more authentic, partnership, than when I was first in Norwalk 20-something years ago. So, yeah, well.
What kind of things you observe?
Oh, there, yeah, unfortunately, the name only, but then, you have to have a willingness to, like, like the conversation, like what I was saying before. A desire to learn and want better for your young people. We were moving at the time. We had a small little program for young people at the library right here. Well, the library called our CA and said, we have all these kids unsupervised. Can you create a program? And so we did. And then I became the manager of it, and it was like, all right, we need a little more structure around this. We moved it over to NCC, but that's when I went out. I was curious. I went to Carver. What do you do with your people after school? I went. That's how Curtis Law and I became really close. Like, what are you doing at the learning centers and Achieve at the time? Maybe, you know, we're going back some of the old Riet and, you know, some of the old players in Norwalk. And that's how I, you know, we kind of created learning circles. How do we all improve, you know, about the services that we provide to families?
Mhm.
Yeah, so I think it's, you know, I do credit Norwalk Acts, and I can't, I mean, personally, because I wasn't here at the time, the formation of kind of when it really started to take off, 2013-14, it was really, you know, people coming at the table and really wanting to partner. So that's our 10-year anniversary about that is really about doubling down after we've had leadership transitions. We've had new people come in since we all as a community agreed to do this collective impact approach. So now it's a little bit of a refresh. Let's remind why we decided to do this, what collaboration is all about, why it's important to do. And, you know, celebrate our successes and also lay some ground still to come.
Yeah, it's so funny because you say a sentence and it's like, next question. And you know, we may think that we are stating the obvious, but sometimes we think that everybody's on the same page and everybody understands the same. We don't talk about maybe it's not so obvious for everybody. So tell us, why is collaboration important?
Well, human beings are complex individuals and they have complex needs. Systems are set up to healthcare system, education system, you know, that there's no one system that covers all the needs of community members, and so to work in silos and isolation is not good for it's redundant and costly, and it's not good on the user end, right? On the individual end, it should be more efficient. I think we could be. I'm actually part of a research project through Fairfield County's Community Foundation right now, looking at it's called the upside of equity and the economic impact in Fairfield County if we closed the racial wealth gap. So there's this argument that, well, we're not getting very far with the moral imperative argument that we should do this. So maybe if we prove that if we close the racial wealth gap, what would that mean to the economy? And what would we do with all those extra resources? It's transportation. I was stuck on the way there. You know, let's make a great podcast. So all the things we could do if we had extra, you know, more resources.
That's a great way to put it. Money talks, and people do care about money.
Yes.
So you show them,
I
right?
hope so.
Right next to oxygen.
Some people believe it's more important. Yeah, if you can show it in a way that shows the benefit to the whole community, and I think it was a presentation last week that, you know, was the conversation and the presentation about if we were to prevent all these things happening in children, right? How much money we would save down the road in trying to,
Yeah.
you know,
That's what's so frustrating, that, you know, so when politics is run by people and you be elected next year, not, we see the benefits of, you know, changing something 16 years from now, but yeah. universal pre-K is just a no-brainer when you think of the economic benefit to. You know, he wants to invest in them. So that instance, but we know for every dollar invested in early childhood, there's that average of $9 to $16 return on. I mean.
How do you change that? There is no incentive.
Yeah.
They have to go to the parachute. They have a full retirement. We don't. So, I'm not a politician, but I just get sick when I think. How do you fight City Hall?
Yeah, well, you infuse City Hall with people like yourselves, right? That, having diverse leaders, having the community understand, how to leverage their influence and the lack of participation. And, I think the Nora Harris said the last budget, there was 4 people that spoke on the budget. And some of that's because, well, why bother? They do anything I do. So there's some.
Only 4 people spoke?
Yeah.
Yes. Yep.
I
Municipal, I'm actually, so I'm with Secretary of State Thomas tonight talking about this very thing, about civic engagement and participation. And there's only like an average of 18 to 20% turnout in a municipal election, when that is, you're most directly impacted by the results of your municipal elections than you are by state or federal, but fewer people turn out. I mean, we have to get back to understanding civics and the importance of it. It's become, and I don't disagree with why people feel this way, but like towards politics, I don't like politics. Politics is how we live in our country, right? It's so I don't like it that you're giving us.
Try negotiating with a toddler, you have to, like, it's part of human nature.
especially on politics. Essential versus leadership. So to your point, people in a position of power, people aren't. People saying people made mistakes, probably not. I'm not saying that I'm a politician or evolving. I'm evolving into what I'm retired from bartending. So table service to public service. And I mean, seriously, I'm here kind of since she was speaking. I have to go to library.
Yeah.
I was actually talking to Sylvie yesterday because like she saw us paint the street. And I'm like, I want to come to the next Chamber of Commerce meeting that you guys are having because I went to another one months ago. But that's the interconnectivity of actually existing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I mean, we're all on the same page about sort of the fundamental issues.
Yeah.
I think we always want like an effective method. And apparently, Black communication seems to be that sort of resounding bell of why one there's sort of attachment from certain organizations, and also people not even knowing how to actually actively engage in the local politics. But so thank you for training. I'm applying it right now.
Yeah.
So I mean, people have to, I have a little bumper sticker that's been on my bulletin board for my whole career that says the world is run by people who show,
Yeah.
right? So, how do we increase but again, easier said than done. You're a single working mother with little kids and you've got like, you have time to pay attention to what's happening on your Board of Ed budget. It's a lot. It's so how do we help, make it more accessible to folks? And, but even, I got involved, I'm elected in my own town because I got speeding. My kids were walkers to our school. And I was like, this is crazy, someone's gonna get killed. So I started reaching out to them, and that's how, then, you be careful when you put your hand up for something that is huge. But then you come to like, well, you gotta put your money where your mouth is. There's a lot of social media complaining.
Yes.
To do anything, right? Like,
That's why it was surprising at the turnout of the BET, because like, that was one of the things that was echoed along social media. This and, it's directly people's money, but more people.
Exactly. And then
It's not like
Yeah.
So guys, show up. And then, showing up here, showing up in every day in our works, but and I think one of the things that make people feel overwhelmed is that once you're faced with these issues, the picture looks so big. If each person were to take one little thing at a time, right? Something that Michelle Obama talked about in one of her posts is to just kids overwhelmed nowadays because they feel they need to say the whole word.
Yes.
But really, it is important to think about what is the one piece that I can do that is actionable. And somebody else will take on something else, do something else, and just that helps. You know, there are these things to fix, and you're not having a planning the plan to do.
Yeah, choose your thing, and often it's, based on personal experience. I always talk about, I became very involved in a particular issue because I had a very difficult death of one of my parents, and so I wouldn't have ever become a staunch advocate for this one thing if I didn't have that experience, right? But that, so there's all sorts of reasons why people do heart walks or, Alzheimer's, this or that. It's once you have a lived experience with something, you have passion for it, right?
Yeah.
How do you lean into the, whatever it is?
Right. Awesome. So I have a question here that said, so what topics do better when they're thinking about collaboration?
They do better, but I think it starts from the top. Getting, setting examples, so a leader, making sure leadership is into partnerships, and I know, for instance, FCA, when I first started going to NORCX meetings, when I was in services, still forming, they were, sure, sounds good, right? But then it was over time, the CEO there really has completely embraced, that their staff, most every department serving on different committees. He joined the board of directors. He really led by example for, so then just an added nice to have. This is integral to your job, that you are connected to this other services. And so I think it's really important to for leadership to kind of lead by example there. Talking to funders about what it takes. We're all stretched with. I mean, we're having that exact conversation with a funder that we participate in NORCX in this policy coalition, and I keep saying to the funder, well, you gave money to support the person, but the amount of time I have to participate in that means that I'm not doing X, Y, Z. And so it doesn't really help to build capacity here if there's no trickle down to build capacity for me to be able to be active in this. So I think we have to be honest and have those conversations. So
Yeah, and it's like, my questions, because my next one was like, what can partners? Oh,
well, we touched on this a little bit before, but yes, this, because participation in partnerships and coalition would look like overhead to a funder, right? If it's staff time, that's not with a client. But so I think we really have to push back on funders and being real about what the costs are. We also woefully under resource and fund staffing, so we're expecting staff to do some of the hardest work it is, and most staff and nonprofits can qualify for the services that the nonprofit works because they make so little. And so we also have to start changing that. Just because people choose to go into nonprofit work does not mean they should take an oath of poverty. Okay. So, I think pushing back on that a little bit, there could be another, one of my biggest strengths is, I do all of our fundraising and grant writing, and for a nonprofit leader to start every year, my fiscal year starts again in a couple days, and it's like the pressure to fundraise. I have the staff to work about it, and things to, so not having multi-year funding. Most grants and foundations, your budget. I mean, ask any for-profit corporation to guess how much they might make in sales next year and try to create a budget, right? So you are guessing that this funder is going to give you another grant next year, but their grant cycle doesn't even come out until January. And then what if they decide to change focus and they're gonna, to do something different next year? And it is a very, very difficult position for nonprofits to be in, to try to manage, but especially if it's, if there's no earned income, there's no fee for service. At least if there's fee for service, you can kind of, approximate how much, but if we don't have clients, we don't have fee for service. We do get some because we do data work for them. That's for support income, but it's quite small relative to our budget. And that is really, really taxing for us to try to come up with a budget every year.
Right. And when we think about it, and we have reached our time, I want to acknowledge that. Time goes very fast when you're having fun. But on that note, one of the things is also when, corporations want to, right? And so it's not only to fund it, sometimes they want to engage into initiatives that, I want my team to paint your walls, but you have no walls to paint. And so it takes a lot of education as well, because sometimes it's about like making your employees feel like good about what they're doing and not exactly about where your mission is about it.
Exactly. I think that recognition that, sometimes what feels good for the funder, the corporation is a huge burden back onto the nonprofit, just taking away resources,
Right.
clients, to try to make them have a feel good experience.
Exactly. How do we fit them into these activities so then they give us money? And it's just, you're playing this all the time to try to enable to kind of engage them, and that's not easy. And puts that up, not easy. Yeah. Education to do out in the community, to people, to funders, to other people that do the work that we do. I don't know if anybody has any questions that you'd like to add. Few tips, we'll move them into the next section so we can announce session on time. It was minimal. I mean, it's not much that I can add to what Jennifer has said today. Really, thank you for being here with me.
Add that, we do have a general interest newsletter, so please make sure you go on our website and you subscribe and keep up with everything that we're doing. If you go to norwalkacts.org, you can click on subscribe and you'll be able to add your email to our newsletter. I hope you all are receiving it. If not, support you come across, right?
And check that website, it's a wealth of knowledge right there.
Yeah.
Good information. So
the data dashboards are updated for the most recent early childhood information, and I believe we'll be having another update towards the end of the year for the youth survey they'll be administered in October. So it's
and
definitely
the civic engagement dashboard, so you can see by district, who's
Yes.
voting, who's not, like the percentage of people voting and participating.
yes,
Fantastic.
definitely, yeah.
great work. Thank you so much. Have you enjoyed it? So much.